HG is of course the OG when it comes to time travel. There were earlier examples of the narrative ploy of having a character move forward and backwards in time. Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, for instance, Ghost of Christmas Past, anyone? But the first to use a machine, the first to invoke some kind of science, was of course The Time Machine by H.G. Wells, first published in 1895. Along with some of the other books that H.G. Wells wrote, it's a foundational work of science fiction generally, and fired the starting gun for the time travel fiction, of which there is now a substantial body of work. And it's one of my favourite tropes in science fiction. The protagonist in The Time Machine is known only as the Time Traveller, and he's a Victorian scientist who demonstrates a small model of his invention to sceptical dinner guests. And soon afterwards he embarks on a journey in the full-scale machine, returning after brandy, looking dishevelled and exhausted, ready to recount his extraordinary adventures. Travelling over 800,000 years into the future, he discovers a world transformed beyond recognition. Humanity has diverged into two species, the delicate, childlike Eloi, who live carefree lives above ground, and the nocturnal, ape-like Morlocks, who dwell underground and feed upon the Eloi. After rescuing an Eloi from drowning, he explores ruined cities, fights the Morlocks to recover his time machine, and narrowly escapes further danger. And in a desperate bid for survival, he propels himself millions of years into the future, witnessing the dying Earth and bizarre alien-seeming creatures and the eventual extinction of all life. Humbled by what he's witnessed, and despite spending weeks or months subjectively in the future, he returns to his own time just a few hours after leaving, bearing as proof two unusual white flowers given to him by one of the Eloi. And actually, I read it for the first time earlier this year, and I think for a book that's 130 years old, it holds up remarkably well. I think of time travel as the ultimate what-if question. And ever since The Time Machine, science fiction authors have explored that ultimate what-if. What if we could go back in time and, for example, kill Hitler in the 1920s? Would World War II and millions of deaths have been avoided, or would something even worse have happened? Bring the Jubilee by Wardmore was published in 1953, and it's a landmark work, mainly of alternate history, imagining a world in which the Confederacy triumphed at Gettysburg. And in this reality, the United States is a weakened, impoverished rump, a remnant, overshadowed by the much more powerful and wealthy Confederacy. In this book, Moore paints a vivid picture of this alternate 20th century, showing life in a diminished New York City and the broader social and political consequences of the Southern victory. The novel is told through the diary of Hodge Backmaker, born in 1921, and in the first line of the book it's clear that something odd, something timey-wimey is happening, as despite his birth in 1921, he's writing this down in 1877. In the 20th century, Hodge grows up as a quiet dreamer and as an aspiring historian, obsessed with understanding the pivotal moments that shaped his world. He drifts to New York City, working as an indentured servant in a bookstore, whilst immersing himself in the study of the Civil War. And his life changes, though, forever when he joins Hagershaven, a utopian scholarly community where intellectuals explore the possibility of reshaping history. And among those brilliant minds and complex personal dynamics, Hodge has the tantalising opportunity to travel back in time. Seizing the chance to witness the Battle of Gettysburg for himself firsthand, Hodge confronts the paradoxes and the fragility of history. His presence, his unwitting interventions have unforeseen consequences, underscoring how even an accumulation of one individual's minor actions can ripple across time and alter the fate of nations. Indeed, Moore's thesis, really, in this book is that history itself is exactly that, an accumulation of incremental, small decisions, small encounters, sliding doors moments that combine over time to give us the past, influencing our present and the future too. And I think it's this messing with the flow of time that I find so fascinating in this particular corner of science fiction. Next up is 11-12-63 by, of course, Stephen King. And in this book, Jake Epping's life takes an extraordinary turn when his friend Al Templeton shares a secret hidden inside his small-town diner, a doorway that leads straight back to 1958. Every visit through the portal begins at the same moment in the past, and every return to the present erases the time spent away. It is, in every sense, a second chance at history. Importantly, Al believes that this portal offers the chance to change the world for the better, most importantly by preventing the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. But Al's failing health means that he cannot complete this mission himself, and so he asks Jake to take it on, to take his place. Reluctantly at first, Jake steps into the past and finds himself in a very different America, full of 1950s cars, fashions and cultural shifts. But life in the past isn't as simple as Jake hoped. The timeline resists change, pushing back against anybody who tries to alter it. And actually that's a theme that we'll return to later in the video. Each decision that Jake makes carries unexpected consequences, and he quickly realises that rewriting history is far more dangerous than he imagined. Stephen King asks us, if you could step into the past and change the future, would you? And what price would you be willing to pay? One of the most intriguing prospects of time travel is the paradox. Can you go back in time and kill your grandfather? Will you just cease to exist? And if you did cease to exist, then how could you have travelled back in time to kill your grandfather? And on it goes. And sticking with the grandparents, what if you could go back in time and fall in love with your own, presumably very attractive grandmother? Can you become your own ancestor? And how would that work? Up the Line by Robert Silverberg was published in 1969, and it's a dazzling exploration of time travel and its paradoxes. The story follows Judd, who's a time courier, and he works for a corporation, a travel corporation basically, that enables wealthy tourists to witness history firsthand. From Byzantium to Renaissance Italy, Silverberg paints the past with meticulous detail, capturing not only the sights and sounds, but also the cultural rhythms of each era. Judd is both guide and flawed protagonist, and he's caught in the ethical tangle of time manipulation. He quickly learns that the rules governing temporal travel are unforgiving, and even small mistakes can have devastating ripple effects. And his journey is as much about navigating the mechanics of time as it is about confronting his own choices, sometimes reckless and sometimes deeply human. It's Robert Silverberg, so the prose is elegant and immersive, balancing vivid historical descriptions of, I think, some of his favourite historical eras, with some sharp interior reflection. The result is a story that's not just clever, but emotionally resonant. Judd forges connections, suffers losses, and even embarks on an ill-advised romance with a distant ancestor. I particularly like the notion that taking group after group of tourists back to key events would result in extreme crowding at, say, the crucifixion, because there's lots of groups but only one crucifixion, presenting the possibility of the time couriers bumping into themselves. Over 50 years later, Up the Line remains fresh and inventive and eventually entertaining, a time travel odyssey that blends paradox with a bit of history and lyrical storytelling, and it's still one of my favourite Robert Silverbergs. Kindred by Octavia Butler is a gripping and arguably genre-defined novel that blends, again, historical fiction with time travel to explore race, power and identity. The story follows Dana, who's a young black writer living in 1976 California, who's mysteriously pulled back to the early 1800s on a Maryland plantation. And there she repeatedly saves the life of Rufus, who turns out to be the white son of a slave owner. And each trip exposes her to the brutal realities of slavery. Dana's experiences in the past are harrowing and transformative. Her identity as a modern black woman makes her an anomaly, and she must navigate violence, social hierarchies and moral dilemmas whilst trying to survive. Dana forms a complex and fraught relationship with Rufus, who grows from a vulnerable child into a cruel slave master. And Dana's repeated returns to her own time leave her physically and emotionally scarred and strain her marriage to Kevin, a white man, who also becomes entangled in the past. Time in this book moves at two different speeds in each of the two eras, intensifying the psychological and moral stakes. The slaves that Dana encounters are depicted with some vivid humanity, striving for agency in a world that they can't control, and survival amidst the systemic oppression of slavery. It's a timeless, no pun intended, powerful and thought-provoking read. Before we look at some more books, what are your favourite time travel books? Have you read any of these books and what did you think? Do let me know in the comments down below. The next two books explore what happens when the theory of relativity itself is your time machine. The Forever War by Joe Haldeman, inspired by his experiences in the Vietnam War, is a landmark science fiction novel, and it explores war, time and human change. The story in this book follows Private William Mandela, who's a brilliant physicist, and he's drafted into the military to fight a brutal interstellar war against the alien Taurans. And unlike typical war stories, Mandela's training and missions take place in extreme otherworldly settings, on Charon, Pluto's moon, and across distant star systems, where soldiers face harsh physical conditions and unconventional social norms, including a very fluid approach to sexual relationships. The Forever War's most striking element is the effect of relativistic time dilation. Although Mandela experiences each tour of duty as a few months, due to the distances travelled at high speed, relativity ensures that decades pass on Earth between each deployment. Families age or die, and society itself transforms, and the world he returns to grows increasingly alien. And these temporal shifts magnify the personal and emotional costs of war, creating a profound dislocation and isolation for the returning soldiers. Sticking with time dilation, in 1970's Tau Zero by Paul Anderson, the starship Leonora Christine sets out on a colonising mission to the star Beta Virginis. Powered by a Bussard ramjet, the ship can't travel faster than light, meaning that the crew will experience time dilation. What feels like 5 years on board will be 33 years on Earth. Or that's the plan, anyway. However, disaster strikes when the ship passes through a nebula and damages the deceleration field generators, making it impossible for the ship to brake, to slow down. They're stuck between a rock and a hard place there because they have to keep the engines running to shield the crew from deadly radiation. So the ship must continue accelerating, bringing them closer and closer to the speed of light and far, far beyond their original destination. As they race through space, time dilation grows extreme, taking them millions of years and countless galaxies away from any chance of returning to Earth. Their only hope is to find a region of space where they can safely make repairs. But as they travel between galaxies and eventually even beyond the superclusters, they find that the universe itself might be running out of time. Amid the crisis, Constable Charles Raymond struggles to maintain order and morale amongst the crew. His no-nonsense, hard-edged leadership style is crucial in keeping the community intact, as they face both the emotional toll of isolation and the mounting terror of their seemingly endless voyage. Can the Leonora Christine survive? Will the acceleration ever stop? And can the Constable hold the crew together until they can find somewhere sensible to settle? Tau Zero is a gripping exploration of human endurance, cosmic phenomena, and the nature of time itself. I think striking a great balance between the amazing physics and the human factor aboard the ship. In her Oxford time travel books, Connie Willis explores the notion of time travel as a tool for historians, a way to add real experience of historical events to the analysis and assessment of history. Nothing bad can come of this, right? 1990's Doomsday book is the first of the Oxford time travel books, with the historical era of interest in this case being the build-up to the Black Death in the early 14th century. One plot thread is in 2050's Oxford, and that's focused on the history department of the university. And the other is in the 14th century village of Stengate, which is just about within the sound of Oxford's church bells. Kivrin is preparing to travel back to the Dark Ages, but Professor Dunworthy is fretting. He believes that Gilchrist, the acting head of the history faculty, has made shortcut after shortcut in the preparation, and is concerned for Kivrin's safety. Still, back she goes, and all appears to be well. A celebratory drink is had in a nearby pub, but soon Badri, the technician, appears, muttering something about something being wrong, and back to the lab they all troop, with Badri staggering ahead down a busy high street full of Christmas shoppers. We're about to find out what went wrong when Badri keels over. We sort of anticipate Kivrin to be subject to all sorts of 14th century pestilence, although she has been immunised, but instead it's the 2050s that gets the epidemic and the associated quarantine, at least at first. Back in the 1320s though, Kivrin has arrived roughly where she expected to, but she's ill, seriously ill. She's nursed, to the extent that anyone can be nursed in the 1320s, by the residents of the local manor house. Her translator tech is malfunctioning and she can't understand or be understood. And what with her high fever and her raving in a strange language, she's in danger, a very real danger, of being burnt for a witch. Connie Willis is justly famous for the depth of her research. The historical elements are compellingly real in these books, making for a really believable and immersive setting. Doomsday book is an engaging read, and I really like Kivrin as a character, and I enjoyed her experiences in the 14th century. And we eventually get a front row seat to the main event of that time period, the Black Death itself. And I must say it's pretty harrowing stuff, with some particularly poignant scenes which tugged at the old heartstrings. If you like a time travel book, or the dangers of paradoxes, or even a bit of historical fiction, then I think Doomsday book would work well for you. The time travel mechanism of Doomsday book, something called the net, features once more in the two-parter Blackout and All Clear, which are set mainly in London in 1940 during the Blitz. It's widely assumed that the net somehow imposes strict rules which are meant to prevent paradoxes or serious historical interference. And in this system, the past seems to protect itself. Attempts to travel to dangerous or pivotal moments often fail, and when trips do succeed, slippage can nudge travellers away from their intended destination, either in time or in distance, or both, in order to keep events on track. And even within these safeguards, the work is far from risk-free. Once a historian visits a moment in time, they can never return to it again, and the authorities impose further limits on periods judged too perilous, too likely to result in serious paradox. In Blackout and All Clear, Willis takes these ideas into one of the most turbulent eras imaginable, Britain during the Second World War. A group of 2060s Oxford historians, each with their own assignments, find themselves scattered across wartime England. They adopt cover identities and attempt to carry out their research, but soon discover that reaching their drop points to return home isn't as straightforward as it should be. What begins as academic observation becomes a tense and deeply human story of endurance, of adaptation and connection. Through the historian's eyes, Connie Willis captures the resilience of ordinary people under extraordinary circumstances. Once again, Connie Willis manipulates our emotions with some vivid personal relationships in these books. And in particular, I love the two slum kids who are irrepressibly cheeky and mischievous, and have an important role to play that resonates down the decades, and which, I'll confess, made me sob like a baby as the second book, All Clear, came to a close. These books, which are really one novel in two parts, are both rich in historical detail, bringing to life the terror and the camaraderie of the Blitz, whilst also exploring some bigger questions. Does history itself resist change? What obligations do observers have to the people that they encounter? And what if the past needs them more than they ever imagined? Maybe it's completely unrealistic to send people back in time, and arguably it's more fantasy than science fiction. But what if you could send information back in time? Part early climate fiction, part urgent science experiment, Timescape was first published in 1980 and won both the Nebula and the John W. Campbell Award for Best Novel. In Timescape, we follow two scientists, one in Cambridge in the UK in the late 1990s, which was the future at the time that Benford wrote the book, and one in the early 1960s in California. In 1998, the world is falling apart due to viral algal blooms, plus there's a general background of unrest and conflict due to shortages. Benford gives us a detailed depiction of ecological disasters caused by this viral material that's spreading through the water cycle and the atmosphere. John Renfrew, the English scientist in 1998, is busy trying to send a message back in time to the 1960s, a warning that gives enough time to take actions to prevent the future disaster. But how do you send a message back in time? Using tachyons, of course. Timescape covers Renfrew's attempts to send a message, and his counterpart in the 1960s, Gordon Bernstein's attempt to figure out just what it is that's messing with his sensitive experiment. Could it be a message? Surely not. And from where? Or from when? In the meantime, we get some realistic scientist office politics. We get some compelling glimpses of the accelerating fall in the late 1990s England, and even some treatment of alternative realities. It's heavy on the science. It is Gregory Benford after all, but I thought that he tackled the human aspects of the book pretty well too. Particularly I thought the scenes and sections in England. Claire North's The First 15 Lives of Harry August from 2014 is a dazzling reinvention of the time travel novel, and is built on a simple but astonishing idea. A rare few people, known as Kalachakra, are reborn into the same life again and again and again, carrying their memories with them each time. Each cycle offers not only another chance at life, but the cumulative weight of centuries of experience. So there is a time loop thing here, kind of whole life Groundhog Day, but that's not really where the time travel kicks in. Harry August is one such Kalachakra, and through his eyes, we explore what it means to live repeatedly in a world that changes only incrementally. When history itself begins to accelerate in dangerous ways, Harry is drawn into a mystery that stretches across his many lifetimes. The book opens with Harry dying his 11th death in a hospital bed, and a young girl bursts into his room and tells him very earnestly that the world is ending and that it's getting closer and that he must do something about it. And this is actually the time travel element. Again, we're talking about information, messages, not people. When Harry dies, her message will be carried back to Harry's youth. And I really love this aspect of the book, and it's that element that stayed with me a couple of years later. It really made me think and properly messed with my head. All of the books that we've covered so far, I've read some of them more than once, and I'd recommend every one of them to science fiction readers, but especially if you like a time travel tale. But what about some more recent books that I haven't got to yet? If I had a time machine, I could go and read them and then travel back in time to tell you about them. But for now, we'll have to make do with the blurb on the book and whatever else I've been able to find out about them. Emily St. John Mandel's The Sea of Tranquility is a time-bending novel that connects lives across centuries, from the early 20th century to a distant lunar future. The story begins in 1912 when Edwin St. Andrew, a young English exile in Canada, experiences a strange rupture in reality whilst wandering the forests of Vancouver Island. For just a few seconds, he hears a violin playing and finds himself in a dark, unfamiliar space. Decades later, similar moments of dislocation occur for other characters, who each in their own time encounter the same haunting phenomenon. Threading these stories together is Gaspard Jacques Roberts, a man from the 25th century who trains as a time traveller with the mysterious Time Institute. His mission is to investigate these anomalies, which some believe may be evidence that reality itself is a simulation. This Is How You Lose the Time War is a lyrical, time-bending novella that blends science fiction, romance and poetry into something entirely unique. At the book's heart are two rival agents, known only as Red and Blue. Red and Blue come from opposing empires, each waging an endless battle across countless timelines and alternate histories. Their mission is to change the past and the future in ways that ensure their own side's survival, even if that means erasing whole worlds. But amid this grand, destructive conflict, something unexpected happens. Red and Blue begin leaving each other secret letters. What starts as playful taunts grows into fascination, intimacy, and finally love. Next up is The Ministry of Time by Kaliane Bradley. In the near future, the British government discovers a doorway that allows travel through time. And to control this extraordinary power, an organisation tasked with managing, amongst other things, expats, historical figures who were destined to die in their own eras, but who are instead rescued and brought into the present. And these expats must learn how to navigate a society utterly foreign to them, guided by ministry bridges, modern-day mentors, who teach them language, culture and survival skills. This story is told through the eyes of a young woman of mixed British and Cambodian heritage, who becomes the bridge for Graham Gore, a doomed explorer from the ill-fated Franklin expedition. Alongside him, other expats arrive from the English Civil War, the Great Plague and the First World War. Together they have to struggle with culture shock, clashing identities and deep questions about empire, race and gender and belonging in a world centuries removed from their own. But the ministry is not as benevolent as it first appears. Political tensions, hidden agendas and whispers of betrayal begin to fracture their carefully constructed programme. This apparently is a time travel story unlike any other. It's part thriller, part political drama and part meditation on what it means to carry the past into the present. I hope you enjoyed that video. As always, thank you for watching, and until next time, goodbye for now.